Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and this week I have a terrific guest. Now, I know last week I went on and on about how bright and articulate and talented our guest was, and certainly William Sims lived up to the hype. He was wonderful. This week, I think I've even upgraded to his childhood babysitter, to one of the most brilliant, talented, wonderful community service oriented people you'll ever meet. She is the very well-known Sarah Mitchell of Ponchatoula, now living in Hammond. She's a vice president of North Oak. She's serving our entire community. Sarah, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Parker. Thank you so much for having me. And William would have probably called me Say Say. So that's
Say Say is that's the nickname we all knew you by coming up.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you for being on the show. Why don't we start out by you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, of course. Thanks, Parker. As I told y'all, my nickname, Say Say. Originally from Ponchatoula, went to school, all public schools through here, graduated from Ponchatoula High.
Graduated
Sarah,
as valedictorian, I might add. Number one,
yeah.
numero
Yeah, one
uno.
of three. So I have to give a shout out to Wendy and Robin and Jody at the same time. I do remember that. So certainly went to Ponchatoula, then went on to SMU my freshman year, and we got the death penalty. I guess you'll learn in this, I'm a big sports fan, so ended up going, Mississippi State after that. And that'll
Folks, Say was not going to be at a college with no football. So,
exactly.
Became a bulldog after that. I got you.
And then, of course, Daddy, who was Mac Mitchell, and my mother was Sarah Mitchell. Mac was huge Mississippi State fan. So literally when I left SMU, it was kind of no more private school, girl. You're going where I went to school. So I went on up to
we're going to ask you about your college years later, and I can't wait to get into the details there because look at the color I'm wearing here. It's a big year for the Maroon Bulldogs, and I can't wait to talk about our shared history with that school and our family history and the fans that go back, and especially about the national championship they just won in baseball. So far you've brought us up through college in the Mississippi State years. What was the next chapter?
And then after that, I went to LSU. I have a master's degree in communication. And originally, I did want to be a sportscaster. So that was my dream long ago. And then Daddy got sick and kind of things change. And you realize what's important and who's important. And I felt at that point I wanted to be a caretaker or caregiver. So I went back to school at LSU in New Orleans and became a physical therapist. So that's kind of connected. I have a gymnastics background as well. So I kind of mixed sports med in addition with geriatric care, if you will, and had a career as a physical therapist for still at North Oaks, returned to North Oaks. And actually, after a while, decided I wanted to do more of a leadership role. So did that in the rehab department and then jumped into our clinic setting and have been doing that. I've been at North Oaks over 20 years. So now I work on 22, I think. So almost. So yes. So kind of grew up in the system and grew up in the community, but came home to take care of a parent, but stayed home because I loved it. So, and still do.
That's so cool. I can relate to that story because right as I was getting out of law school, my dad was real sick, and I had initially planned to move off to bigger, arguably, and certainly better paying jobs in cities. And it became really important to be home. And I've never regretted that decision. And thank God, Dad's rebounded and done well. But it's neat that you made a similar decision and then you stayed here because you loved it.
Yes.
Let's circle back to those early years. You mentioned being a product of Ponchatoula Public Schools.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some of the things you did when you were in school here and also the people involved, because that's one nice thing about Ponchatoula. We have a singular system, right? There's only one high school in town. And so my story from the 90s may be a little different than yours from the earlier 90s, wink, wink. But we share so many of the same people. So, you can start grade school, high school, wherever you like, but just tell us about what your Ponchatoula school experience was like.
Well, I don't know if you remember, Parker, back when I was at Tucker, we were split. The girls went to Tucker through the 4th grade and the boys went to DC Reeves. And I think after that, I didn't really know boyfriend or girlfriend or boyfriend until the 5th and 6th grade at Martha Vineyard. And that entered in friends that have stayed friends for, that's the Bretts of the world, the Aces, and certainly
Right.
Powell. And so K through 4th was all female, and I certainly had a tremendous role models there that are still in this town. Kathy Treehouse is probably my favorite teacher, and third
Oh,
grade
yeah.
I still remember and attend the same church as she does. So that's quite
He's
special.
wonderful.
But after Vineyard, we went on to Perrin at the time, which is now changed to Ponchatoula Junior High. And then went to Ponchatoula High, which was a block, obviously, from my house. But we were the first graduating class of the new high school. So we went 3 years in the old high school, but we still played ball and all that at the old high school. So it's kind of neat.
So the Swamp Stadium wasn't built yet. Y'all were still at the Cypress Bowl here in town.
We didn't have the Swamp.
Yeah.
And my grandmother Lottie B was a teacher at Ponchatoula High. And then, this is a history.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
that was a great era. You mentioned Henry Powell, who's a great player, and Brett Chatelaine. I remember all the touchdowns he scored and the T-shirt he had to prove it. And it was so cool.
Go down in history. I think he probably still running, after that. I don't even think he scored. I think Henry, Asa must have thrown to Henry. I don't even know, but we beat him, and that's all that mattered.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, let's talk about the Titan of that era. A.J. Barker would be your principal, right? Because we all know him as the principal who built the new high school. Exactly. What was it like being a student in A.J. Barker's Ponchatoula High School?
I think we all knew we had to stay in line because we had Miss Waldrop and we also had Coach Thompson. So we had the disciplinarian.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, you had A.J. running the tightest ship. And but I had known him my whole life. So it's kind of hard if he was yelling or upset. I couldn't really, Carol babysat me too. They're all of these.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I would leave Tucker and go stay at their house in the afternoon. So Mr. AJ has been a staple in my life. And certainly after my father passed away, has continued to be. We're Rotarians now. And he's probably the most admired person I have that just means a great deal to me. My whole life.
But and he deserves every inch of it. He's such a great man. As Miss Carol's daughter, who you mentioned, they're wonderful people. I had the pleasure to work with her daughter Megan for years, and she's just a sweetheart. Talked to her just a couple of days ago, and they're great folks. Speaking of great folks from Ponchatoula here, Mr. Paul Kluka has chimed in. Mr. Paul, thank you for saying hello. He's asked me, Sarah, to tell you hello. So, Mr. Paul, thank you for watching the show. We would love to get you on here, Mr. Paul. I don't know if you'd be interested in being a guest on Ponchatoula Live, but you were certainly one of the icons of the local town. When I was coming up, you were always at the ballpark, volunteering, coaching, you name it, and just always been a man I admire. So, like Mac Mitchell and A.J. Barker and these great men we're talking about. What about on the teacher side of the equation, Ponchatoula High School? Were there any, as a valedictorian, you were clearly a serious student.
And again,
what were your favorite subjects or teachers? Yeah, one of three, right? But also it's modern days it might be one of 30. The grade inflation is a real thing. People are talking a lot about inflation in 2021. The economic inflation's got nothing on grade inflation. And it's funny that when you get a newspaper now with the valedictorians, it takes the whole front page of the Ponchatoula Times.
Yeah.
So
I would think it certainly had so many influential teachers throughout the years. Certainly different categories. The one that pops up immediately is, Miss Shield, Miss Von Seal Shield, hard to be, but you knew your biology. Certainly Mr. Vitter, our physics and chemistry teacher. He was an inspiration just to be sitting with him in the classroom, much less his intellect and how much he taught us. Certainly loved being with Rita Neal, Miss Neal, Jody's mom. We cheered together. Yeah. She was our sponsor. And as far as English, just it gave me a thrill of our yearning to read and to continue that thirst for knowledge. We are very fortunate in a public school system. I cannot. I can probably keep naming multiple.
Yeah, sure.
That were influential and still, in touch with, certainly with Miss Rita. So it's kind of it's nice to have that longevity. And I think recently they just retired, so it's kind of not Miss Shield or Mr.
Yeah.
Baker, but certainly Miss Rita, and it's crazy how great they were for so long.
Yeah, no, wonderful, wonderful educators. I was fortunate that some of them stayed there through the '90s when I was there, and it was great. But you weren't just a bookworm. I know you wore your glasses today, looking intellectual in front of the law books there. And of course, you did well in school, but I think you were the captain of the cheerleaders. Tell us about other things you were into as a kid, because you mentioned the influence of sports on your life. Tell us about what you did, when you weren't in the studying.
So yes, I was a cheerleader, but I was a gymnast growing up all the way till I
Hmm.
guess almost high school. So I could still tumble a little bit by the time we were cheering, etc. But involved in student council, of course, involved in Interact, which led on to Rotary. Student council member of that, member of multiple other clubs, I guess. But I
Yeah.
think cheering and was kind of our thing. So.
Well, so have you been glued to the TV with the Olympics? My dad is an Olympic nut. He watches every inch of track and field was his favorite sport. So that, swimming, Olympics, gymnastics. Have you been watching it closely?
Yes, I'm guilty. I'm the ones that get up at 5 o'clock and watch gymnastics. Absolutely. I tried to watch it live and then wake up in the middle of the night to check the Twitter feed to see who actually wins, and then watch it, and then maybe watch the replay again if it's so good. So definitely the Olympics, I think it was in 76. That was Nadia, caused us all to get gymnastics. And it was kind of, that was the sport then. And now it's certainly grown with soccer and, so many other sports for women. That yes, so it's always been a fun thing to watch and very patriotic and feel very more closely knit with our country.
It's really incredible, and it just gets the juices flowing every time.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking babysitters earlier and babysitting William Sims. Well, I was blessed that my two childhood babysitters, the Neal girls, Marty and Laurie, took me and my brother Bree to the '96 Olympics when we were teenagers.
Okay. Wow!
And it was such a blast. Marty was working for a Swatch watch, which was one of the official sponsors of that Olympics. So she had, a corporate apartment set up and backstage passes and all that. And it was a cool time to be there. We got to see Dream Team and the boxing, and it was really fun.
Well, ironically, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
Parker, you were talking about going to the Olympics. So I actually went to the Los Angeles Olympics. So that was in '84. I was in high school, and my uncle lived in LA at the time. Kind of the same thing. Was able to go.
Oh wow!
And actually was in the arena when Mary Lou won. Hit the vault. And the irony, you come full circle of all that, is her daughter went to LSU and was a gymnast. So I actually got to tell Mary Lou that in person as a big old goob, we're the exact same age. Exactly.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I'm telling her, and she's like rolling her, she's like, Sarah, I'm so, whatever. I mean, I was still in awe of Mary Lou years
Well,
later.
how could you not be? She was on everywhere. She was in the Wheaties box, It's something my kids will never understand.
Yeah.
They're eating Fruity Pebbles these days, but their mom would probably kill me. Not for breakfast. That's a dessert cereal in our house. Randy would want me to.
That's right. Your boys don't.
But let's talk about that connection, because I know that you're very involved with LSU gymnastics. They have an incredible program there. Tell us about the relationship there and how you're kind of on the inside crowd with the gymnasts there.
Well, I guess it started when I was a gymnast, and Dee Dee Bro was named the LSU gymnastics coach. A few years prior, she actually went to Southeastern and was assistant coach there and tore her knee, blah, 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 and her Olympic trials. And then once she got to be the LSU coach, she started recruiting on a small level. Now, not recruiting me, but she did come and would come to the gym, and I started going to her camps. I actually did private lessons with the team when, I had aspirations of being, I guess, better. And my dad would drive me, and he and Dee Dee hit it off. And then we just kind of migrated. I got hurt, but I was never going to be a LSU collegiate gymnast. But just our relationship continued. And once I got back to LSU for graduate school, I started working her camps. And then eventually the coach that I was scared to death of, when she would tell me to throw something, I could have probably thrown a double back, anything. I could have thrown anything.
Right.
And so scared became employer, basically, kind of became casual, and then became friends. And in the midst of this, she had developed a relationship with my father, dad. Daddy had gotten sick, and she had actually been there. It was kind of the irony in Baton Rouge that moved there. She became a pretty strong part of my life, along with my contingent in Baton Rouge. And again, it just grew till it became friends, and then it became basically almost like sisters, being one of the family. She's one of 8. So
Oh, wow.
they kind of took me in. And so very fortunate when she retired, I would go travel with the team and then get to go. She retired this year, so kind of did her swan song and went to nationals with her. So still very, very close friends, and just very motivational, very inspirational in my life as well.
That's so cool, because she was such a phenomenal coach for LSU and built such an incredible program there. And now we're seeing the fruits of it,
Yes.
and it's so cool that you have that insight and that relationship. We've got a few other people chiming in to say hello. This comes up on the screen, folks, is Ponchatoula.com. But I think that's because it's our colleague here at Ponchatoula.com, Mark Verbois. So this is a comment coming from Mark. I think he probably just used the wrong account to log in on, which we don't mind. But he says, I love me some Sarah Mitchell. As long as I've known her, no matter her role, she's always been one of the most positive people I met. It's hard not to be around her and not be in a great mood. Mark has always had a ton of respect for you, Sarah, and how you treat everyone in such a great matter, no matter who the person is. He says that Sarah's a proud product of Ponchatoula and an influential role in North Oaks and in our community. Mark, I could not agree more. Very well said.
Thanks, Mark, so much. Thank you. Right back at you. You mean a lot.
Mark writes often on the show, but he doesn't go into the glowing review like that often. So yeah, you've done something extra. V. Cheney Burton, Veronica chimes in to say hello, and she also says that you're awesome. V, I'd say the same thing about you. In fact, we're talking a lot about how smart Sarah is on this show. Not that many people, or maybe not enough people, know how smart you are. My mom was talking about how you were whipping her at Words with Friends the other day, and she's quite a gamer. So mad props there. Please give my best to Donald. I hope you and your family are doing well.
And
so we're here.
Oh,
cool. I didn't know that. She's a wonderful woman. I love that family. They're like family to us. Donald's like a brother. Speaking of how you can inherit siblings as you did with Coach, Donald's like family to us. So we're here with Sarah Mitchell, Vice President of North Oaks. We're talking childhood up into the college years and different relationships we form. Why don't we take a little detour here before we get into, because I'm asking a little while to compare the various colleges you attended, from SMU to Mississippi State to LSU New Orleans. Very different experiences, I'm sure, and we'll want to hear about it. But let's circle back. You've mentioned your dad several times, and I know that your dad, war hero, icon in the community. You come from such a proud, distinguished family. Tell us what those folks were like. Tell us what your family was like, what it was like growing up in such a great family.
Well, I guess a lot of people. Let me think a second, Parker. So Daddy I'm one of 4, and he was born, I was born to him kind of late in life. He was almost 50 when I was born, pretty much almost to the retirement age, I guess. So
which is totally cool, by the way, says the gray bearded dad who waited till he was 40 to start having kids.
People thought I was his grandchild, and so that didn't work out too well. But I think having an older father who was able to be with me all the time, be with my younger sister. There's a big age gap with my older brother and sister. And so everything from, he taught us how to ride a horse to haul hay. We had a farm outside of town. So literally from a hardworking perspective, we learned although he taught at Southeastern, he was a referee. He had attained his master's degree in a time where, back then, maybe that wasn't, to exceed or succeed to further your education.
Right.
Also, I guess, truly the whole war hero persona, I really didn't know until I discovered in a book until the end of his life. He really never spoke of it. So I learned humility, I hope, at his knees. But truly, I guess, he lived through the Depression. He had lived through combat, hand-to-hand combat, and then he came home and had elderly parents that he took care of. So maybe I learned that as well from him. But also just, I was raised, he was my hero. So there's not really anything else.
How could he not be? What a great man.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And Mom,
it's important to me because I grew up, I didn't have grandfathers as a kid,
Mhm.
you know,
I didn't
and
either. I didn't have
but I was
grandfathers.
blessed to be kind of adopted by some of the finest men you'll ever see. And there were all these great World War II heroes, you know, in the
Yes.
town. And I love that you mentioned your father's humility because, man, you know, he just did so much to give us this freedom we enjoy now. I mean, he was a hero among heroes. And we had, you know, Mr. Reggie Peavy. Speaking of
Mhm.
heroes, one of my lifelong heroes on the show.
Love him. Love him.
Isn't he great? But you
Hmm.
know, and he's a hero, World War II, and of course,
Sure.
it's typical of the humility. He would say, you know, he was on a boat and didn't have to do the hand to hand combat that your father and Hollis Poche and others did. But I think it's just so important that we remember their contributions to the lives that we live because they were not tooting their own horns. You know, I mean, these days guys would be posting on, you know, TikTok, you know, and bragging about stats and whatnot. But there was, you know, just such a class and humility to the men that really paid it all for us. And I don't think Ponchatoula's had a better example of that than your dad. I mean, to hear my father and other folks that raised me, like Winks Vineyard, my next door neighbor,
Mhm.
who was
Sure.
my adopted pawpaw, or Hollis Poche,
Of
my best
course.
friend's pawpaw, or Ned Richardson. I mean, these guys served in all
Elizabeth,
corners of the
yes.
war. And, but you know, that they were great men. So it's neat to hear you talk about
I
him.
literally had to read in this book called Typhoons of Steel. It was a
Uh-huh.
battle that my father, I guess, led. He was a captain, and I mean, Tokyo Rose is calling him out. I mean, it's just you just don't really, you know, they called him the barbarian from the South that spoke
Wow.
Chaucer. He had his grandmother, his mother was an English teacher, so he, you know, I mean, it was hand to hand, and it listed the people that
Yeah.
he, you know, at the time had to kill, and to the day, even you know, at the end of his life was he would be somber on some days, and I'd say, "Daddy, what's wrong?" And he would recall the name and number of the person of one of his men that he had lost that day. So
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
just a different. It's just a different kind of. I mean, I'm not. We're certainly patriotic now, but I learned that. I learned respect for our country. I
Yeah.
just learned respect to work. You know, it was just kind of a very fortunate. Very fortunate.
I just think it's so important that all of us recognize the heroes of every era. So, you know, we're not yet into your career, but you and the other healthcare heroes that are fighting this war on a pandemic right now, y'all
Yes.
do so much. The
Thank you.
rest of us that benefit from that need to pay homage to the folks that do the hard work and make the sacrifices. And, you know, they call it the greatest generation for a reason. America's, you know, they were the best. And we're here enjoying iPhones and, you know, Pizza Hut and all that stuff because those
Exactly.
guys gave and some gave all. So let's circle back to a lighter topic here. We'll get back into the college years. So we mentioned all these schools.
Okay.
Walk us through it. You know, what was it like? You had Texas, Mississippi, back home. You know, give us the college experience. Tell us what it was like.
Well, I went from Ponchatoula to Dallas,
Hmm.
so that was kind of an experience in
Oh,
and of
no change at
itself.
all there, right? From one little town
No,
to another.
one little town to a major metropolitan city. And I really loved Dallas at the time. But as I spoke, I think in the intro, we got the death penalty midway through my
Right.
freshman year. So we were #2 in the country when I decided to go there. I'm Methodist. It was all this, you know, just worked out really
Yeah, yeah.
well. And, you know, everything was, you know, clicking, and then
Isn't
boom.
there a great ESPN documentary on that, on the death
Yes.
penalty and the whole? Yeah, I mean, guys, you got to watch it.
Dickerson,
Y-
Craig,
yeah.
and every building on campus was involved in the slush fund, if you will. So,
Uh huh.
and my dorm was in the dorm where the football players ate. So it was just constant media all year long, I guess. And
Yeah.
then when we lost football, that was a strike. And then most of my, you know, people that I lived with in the dorm, sorority sisters, et cetera, decided to go back home. So I'm still actually good friends with people from
Yeah.
from that freshman year. But
So y'all,
majority
so there's a
decided.
mass exodus. It's like
Oh yeah.
Alabama of today. You go there because
Exactly.
it's the football school, and suddenly, you know, Nick Saban and the program go away.
Goes away.
Everybody goes home. Wow, that's interesting.
Everybody goes home, and of course, I guess everybody, like I said, assumed I would go over to Baton Rouge. But old Big Mac is like, you're going to truck it
Right.
on up to Starkville. So I did go to Starkville
So
State.
explain the connection there. You mentioned what a big state fan he was. So what's
Okay.
the
Yes, so
background?
Daddy went to Starkville. I went to Starkville, Mississippi State, 1938. Long time ago.
Okay.
Graduated in 42. But he played baseball throughout, and he actually played like one semester of football and one semester,
Cool.
basketball.
Right.
He was a big baseball player. He was a catcher. And sad thing was that I don't even know if most people know this. He graduated in 1942, and we know what was going on in the war. So he was actually drafted by the Red Sox, and the same time he was sent overseas.
Oh,
so,
wow. What a bummer.
So, and his pitcher actually made it for the Red Sox. So his pitcher didn't have to go. He had some sort of military thing. So yes, we were Bulldog fans for, our entire lives. I guess every 1 year had an LSU Tulane, LSU Ole Miss. It was always us, LSU and State.
And I'm not sure that local folks, I mean, of course, LSU's had an incredible run in baseball and won all these championships. And I mean, look, Alex Box is incredible. I mean, this is not to denigrate it in any way, but I don't think people understand the baseball environment in Starkville, Mississippi. You kind of have to go there to experience it because, while the team until this year, now they're the best and they've had great history. Will Clark, Rafael Palmeiro, Jeff Brantley, you name it, Bobby Thorpe. Yeah. They've had all these great players, but what I'm getting at here is it's Starkville. There's nothing else going on. Baseball is a way bigger deal relative to the area than even LSU is to Baton Rouge. And it's an incredible atmosphere. I mean, of course, I share a family tie there. I didn't follow them up. I actually went to senior testing there. It was my so I had a few credits at Mississippi State that I never collected
Jackie
on.
couldn't get you there. Yeah.
But I loved growing up. My godfather and dad's cousin Jack Vaughn, who like your father, played baseball there. He was a shortstop. He ended up settling and living there, and of course, you're close with him and Scott and that whole family. John also went to State. But it was so incredible to go up there. I mean, it's kind of a hidden treasure. It's not the destination that some other cities are, but for baseball, you really can't beat it. It's incredible.
And it's so much larger than when I went to school. We kept our football tickets for years and still try to hit at least 1 or 2 games a year.
Yeah.
I'm with LSU fans that hate cowbells more than ever. So, but yeah, it's like a hotel right there. It's beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful campus. We actually have sorority. It's really pretty, and I'm very grateful. And my little sister actually was a year behind me, and she went there and graduated from so the state tradition continued.
You mentioned that. We went back, V. Burton, who was commented a little while ago. Her brother-in-law, Robert Walker, played ball up there, and Daddy and I coached him, so we went up there to watch him, and it was amazing. And that's now been a while. It wasn't yesterday. Their son's going to Notre Dame here soon to play ball. And we had his brother Reggie on the show a while back, but it was amazing the change just from the 90s until then in Starkville, and it keeps growing. It's a college town, but yeah, you're right. It used to be real country back in your day. I bet.
Real country. You have to travel across the county lines.
Maybe
have a cocktail or two.
So that was quite a difference from LSU. What was it like for you when you finally got to LSU for grad school? Were you so stuck in the books that you weren't able to kind of do the typical LSU experience, or were you able to enjoy Saturday night with the rest of them?
Oh, definitely. But I think in graduate school, it's just a little bit different. And I was a graduate student. That certainly shaped my life. I was a graduate student at the LSU Alumni Association. So with that, my graduate teacher, actually, Mary Claire McCarthy, who's from, she's Oregon now, but from Independence and that whole Independence clan was my graduate, I guess, and I was her graduate student, and we became best friends. So from there, I had a whole nother group of best friends. I had my high school, my Wendy, my Jody, and then grew to college at State, of course, but then Baton Rouge kind of solidified another whole group of friends, and was able to go to school there. And again, I was in communications because at that time I thought I was going to be an announcer, call some gymnastics meets, do that. So I think, I was working and going to school, but I still was able to be there on Saturday nights for sure in Death Valley. So definitely got the experience. So
the broadcast career, what kind of action did you get before you switched gears and went into caregiving?
Well, it was, so I did some local gymnastics meets. Well, it was back then, there was no SEC network, of course.
Right.
And ESPN had just started. I actually applied for an internship there, and in getting it just became, I think it was like $5,000 to live in New Jersey, and Daddy got, it's just one of those things that kind of didn't work out. And then I decided that PT was a career that I can incorporate sports. And then my other goal was to always travel to sporting events. I may not get to call them, but be a part of sports in some way. So I kind of melded the two, but yes, did broadcasting there. And in that studio, which the Masscom building has just grown tremendously since, I was there as well.
Yeah.
And opportunities, and no Indeedy back then, that's how I was allowed to broadcast the meets. But again, no SEC network. It was maybe, what was it, Jefferson Pilot? I was so long.
Oh, Jefferson Pilot. That brings back memories.
Yeah. Host
oh, gosh. Yeah. Trying to watch the game when they had it. Yeah.
So it just, although it kind of became a passion, when I started taking care of my father, I certainly realized I wanted to do that with my life. And that was my true passion.
Yeah.
And, had to switch, but still have my foot in the sports world and able to attend a lot of events that very fortunate to be able to attend. So
did you go from one graduate program in Mass Comm straight into PT school, or was there a gap?
There was a gap. There was about a year gap, just simply because I had a liberal arts background.
Right.
And now I needed a more science background. So I kind of went to Southeastern. I picked up credits there. Went to LSU undergrad because I had to get A&P and some physics. And I actually began work at North Oaks as a rehab tech.
So by my count, that's college number 5 if you count the two LSU's
the
locations.
joke my father used to say, or my mama too, used to be, okay, Sarah, you could have been a neurosurgeon. What?
Right. It's like that line in Tommy Boy when David Spade tells Chris Farley, there's a name for folks that go to school 7 years. It's doctor, right?
Exactly. But at least the joke is that I did spend that longer time in school. But along the way, I did get a couple degrees, so it wasn't just a massive of not that. But I started working at North Oaks during this transition, and one of my greatest probably mentors in that career was Lisa Smith, and she took me on as a rehab tech for a year, and then in the process, I applied for PT school and got into PT school at LSU in New Orleans and learned about physical therapy. I had been a recipient of PT, all my gymnastics injuries.
Right.
And so kind of learned again and definitely knew that's what I wanted to do. And going to LSU, I was offered like a volunteer scholarship, kind of a stipend to come back and work for North Oaks. Did I think I would be here 22 years later? It's kind of, you never know how life takes you, but certainly Lisa was instrumental in that as well.
Well, that's neat, and we're certainly lucky you're still here. We have a few comments to share here, and Christy, your sister Christy, has chimed in 20 minutes ago, and somehow I missed it. So, Christy, forgive me for taking so long. I hope you're still with us. But she says, "Love you, my middle little sister."
That's right, and she's a Ponchatoula girl that was also cheerleading captain.
So two captains in one house. Wow. I know how that goes because I'm one of 4 boys. We get a little competitive from time to time. And my little brother Louis made sure to rub it into me when he became Mr. PHS that I was no longer the only Mr. PHS in the house. I never was the only one. Dad did it 35 years before me. So, but I know the sibling rivalries run deep, right?
They do.
So we were talking about William Sims early. William and Dustin say here that we are lucky to have you in Tangipahoa Parish. Thanks for tuning in. I thought you'd never watch Ponchatoula live again after I kept you here an hour last week, William. So thanks for tuning in. And Dawn Keenum Lennox says this is a great interview. And she also says, fortunately, we have you in our parish and in our hospital. So you've got a lot of fans here, Sarah. And you just mentioned kind of how you got here. That makes for a nice segue into your career at North Oaks. You have had quite an accomplished career. I mean, you start as a tech, kind of on a stipend, as you mentioned it. And now here we are 22 years later, you're vice president of this giant hospital. So let's talk about the career, starting anywhere you like, but let's just kind of talk about that journey. Tell us about it.
Well, after I rehab tech, went to school and came back, I became a physical therapist. And I would guess at that time, I was an inpatient physical therapist, if you will. So I was doing more of actually working in the hospital. And I did some of outpatient, again, I went into school thinking I wanted to do sports medicine, outpatient, do nothing but
Right.
treat athletes. And then when I got out, I wanted to do nothing but the total opposite. So I actually wanted to be on the front end of therapy when someone had a stroke or someone had a brain injury.
Right.
And at that time, we did burns. At that time, I did burns as well. So it was kind of, we did wound care. I wanted to kind of guide their therapy or help to guide their outcome or their functional outcome. So I ended up staying on the inpatient setting and actually loved it. So I would see people as soon as they had their hip surgery or be the first person there to help them walk after a stroke. So pretty
You should mention that one of my colleagues, one of the attorneys in our building in the office next to the room you're in, had hip surgery within the last week. So we might put you to work and you know,
I'm gonna make sure he's up and walking for sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Please keep going.
That's perfectly fine. And so I think from there it just grew to wanted to be more in a supervisor role, and I took on our rehab techs, where I was still working, but I had a supervision role in hiring, and I was learning management as well as getting to teach, which I love to do, getting to teach how to transfer, how to teach people to walk. So that kind of encompassed a little bit more. And then kind of after that, I said, well, maybe I want to help lead our whole group, not just our therapists, but maybe our PTs, our occupational therapists, our speech therapists, and be more a part of the management team and the direction that we're flowing. So I became a coordinator of our rehab department. And as I mentioned before, Lisa Smith, my mentor, was our director. And she, I guess, you know, and we had a long talk that it was time for me to grow even beyond that. And at that point, she wasn't retiring, and I knew she wasn't. I thought, well, one day maybe I would come back to serve her role. But she kind of pushed the little bird out of the nest, and I jumped into what was our clinic division. And became a director there over certain clinics. So right now I am, you mentioned, a VP of our surgical service line, which is basically I have all of our clinics that aren't in surgical practices, whether they're employed or non-employed, except for orthopedics. So that's eye, ENT, derm. There's about 9 of them, but work with our employed providers as well as our trying to do a service line perspective from beginning to end of our patient. So I guess I've had multiple other roles. I think I've had at least every clinic in our division at some point, from practice to walk-ins but have settled on the surgical practices probably the most. And I do think PT has a nice adjunct to that. Just knowing the body clinically helps a lot, and being on the floor. So that's
I know you do a great job, and not just because I hear it on the street, and not just because all these folks in Ponchatoula sing your praises, but as a personal injury attorney, my clients need those services all the time. And there are a lot of great therapy clinics out there, but the physical therapists at North Oaks are top notch. They do a wonderful job.
I'm very proud of them.
And when my oldest son, Luke, was born, he needed a little PT. I can't remember the name of the condition, but where the baby's kind of cockeyed. Yeah, that's it. That's the word. That's the magic word I can't remember. Non-valedictorian here. Can't remember corticollis, even though it have. But we had the best. Josh, I think Melina was just a great. I may have the name wrong. Forgive me, Josh. But we had the best PT. But it was a wonderful experience from the admins up front taking you in to the actual therapists. I mean, it was top flight, and I think that's back when you were running that division in your pre-surgical days.
We like to have all that in our clinics as well.
So kudos on the great job you do, and that's all such important stuff. And I've just seen so many clients come through there and get good results. So thank you for doing that. When you look back, what I'm noticing here is progression in your career of high achievement at every level. I mean, whether you're on like cheerleading or, high school level, into grad school and beyond. But I also noticed with you, Sarah, a call to leadership. We just heard the story of how you were called to leadership within the hospital and how you went from one level to another. What the part I've seen up close and personal is in your volunteer work, because folks may not know that you have been just a tireless volunteer and community servant on so many levels. And you mentioned Rotary early. We were Rotary presidents, pretty close in time. And so I got to see that, being on the board with you and everything. But I know that you have also been president of tons of other organizations, from hospice to American Cancer Society, Junior Auxiliary Woman of the Year. I mean, you name it. Tell us about how public service and community service became such a priority of yours, and also kind of what's behind the calling to lead these organizations, because you don't just show up and join. You take it a step further and you do the work. You hustle, but then you also take it another step up and you step into leadership and you assume responsibility. And it seems like you've done that in virtually every organization you've joined, which is a long list.
Wow. Okay, Parker, you did way too much homework, but I
Hey,
think when I initially,
Norfolk makes it easy by putting it online.
oh my God. Okay, that's embarrassing. But I think when I came back from when I graduated PT school and I came back to our community, North Oaks gave so much opportunity to get involved in a volunteer way, but I also wanted to get involved in our community, being single, etc. And I chose at the time anything that meant something to me. And I think that where you have your passion. So at the time, my father died of leukemia. So I kind of buried myself in American Cancer, and then it became hospice because at that time, they didn't have hospice for him to come home, but we were able to do it in the hospital, et cetera. So I became pretty big cancer advocates. And I think it just was innate because of what I'd seen him go through. And I wanted to try to make a difference, whether that was trying to raise money. And I was really wanting to be in organizations that were only driven for our community. Like Richard Murphy Hospice, of course, is giving back to our community. And American Cancer, I did go into a more of a leadership role because I wanted to make sure the funding and everything that we did stayed in our community to help our people. And I think that's what drove me to be in those organizations. And honestly, in Rotary, your mom and I, and now Angelique, and we were the first females. So when AJ asked me to be in Rotary, it was very difficult because I'd grown up in Rotary, but not as a member of being a female. So I think in following my father, my grandfather, and I wanted to take that leadership role and again, make a difference in Ponchatoula and what we do. I don't know if it's a ridiculous drive. I don't know if it's just, I know I can evoke change more in a leadership role maybe and just maybe purely volunteering. And I know I've spoken a lot about my daddy, but with my mama has recently passed away. And so I've kind of stepped off with those other boards. I had a kind of a gap where I was a primary caregiver for my mama, which was about 6 years, I would say. And she was here, we moved her back to our area and I was, able to take care of her, and she passed away last year. And to honor her, I wanted to be part of an organization. Again, it's something that meant something to her that I can further her legacy, but also help me in the grieving process, I guess. If that makes sense. So she was a special education.
Let's take a moment. Tell us about your mom. What was she like? I know you were very close.
Yes. So she's, I'm named after her, which is kind of crazy. I'm her second daughter, but I'm also Sarah. So the joke was always Big Say and Little Say, and raised in North Louisiana. Again, someone that went on to graduate school, and a time where a woman really didn't do that. And she's a teacher. She's a special education teacher, which I'm so proud of. And it was way before special education classes. So she mainstreamed kids way before that was even supposed to. And she would often speak about this blind child that she had. She just had story upon story. Yeah. So my father died. She moved to Lafayette to be with both my sisters there, Christy that chimed in, and the majority of her grandchildren. She does have grandchildren in California and et cetera, but she then came back after she had a hip surgery over there, a fall that didn't work out well. So I was apart from her for a while, and I think I'll be honest, mothers and daughters aren't always as tight. I think our lives, we butted heads, I think. But then when she came back for 6 years, it was the greatest gift. Being a PT, first of all, crazy. And then actually still being here and being able to move her home, have my docs at my hospital take care of her, and having some control. That's another issue. But to be, that's
when it comes in handy to be the boss when you get
no, they're wonderful, but having control over, or not control, but being a major part of her kids and taking care of her. So we formed a relationship in the later years of her life that truly is amazing. And I think when she died last year, it was such a I don't know, it was just such a beautiful experience, even during the midst of COVID, that we had mended, we had grown, we had forgiven, we had become best friends. And I'm just so grateful for that. But
That's so cool.
just the coincidence that I truly knew at that point when I brought her home, Parker, that I was supposed to still be in this community. I was supposed to have been a PT. I was supposed to have been able to do stuff.
Yeah.
And
That brought home that you made the right call all those years ago. Yeah.
I know. And if that's the only thing I
gratifying.
accomplished in my life was to take care of her, then that's what I was meant to do. So, and so from that, I kind of jumped into options now. So I've just been,
folks, I didn't come near to hitting the whole list. You know, we left off the Boys and
but
Girls Club,
as
Leadership Tangible Ho, options.
Okay, that's enough. As a tribute to her.
Did I say Relay for Life? You know, and there's more. There's more.
No, but your volunteer question, I guess to begin with, I went with cancer because that's with Daddy, and now I've switched to options. Not switched, but done my time.
Yeah.
Can honor my mama, and so I think it's a
I
grieving
love
process,
options.
but
It's one of the. My mom's been very active in options as long as I can remember, and I serve on the TARC board. That's kind of a sister organization with a very similar purpose, and that's a wonderful organization with great people involved on every level. And I thank you for that service, because serving on the TARC board shows me just how important and how underserved that community could be if options and TARC didn't step up to help folks in need. Speaking of, powerful relationship with the important women in your life and best friends, tell us about, your dear friend, Grace Gassaway, who we all loved and missed. Grace was, I think, the third guest on this show, one of the most popular episodes ever. Talking about heroes, she was always one of my heroes. In my nearly 20 years of practicing law, she was at the top of the game, from the beginning on my day one till the day she left. And I know, what was it like to be her best friend and be so close with such a wonderful woman?
Well, again, I was very fortunate. I spoke about her today. Someone asked me how, we met, and we met on a spin bike at 5 a.m. I'd known her. I'd come home. I knew she was a judge. I'd known Brett my whole life, actually, from the past. And so it was we just became friends on a spin bike, and she invited me down to her 40th birthday. Birthdays were always big for her. She planned them all.
She had some big parties.
Yeah, and so I guess that's one thing I certainly learned for her is to plan your own party. And just went down by myself, got a hotel room, and met her and her friends became my friends. And I was fortunate enough to be part of a life with her mother, and certainly with Brooke and her family, and meals. And the craziness of the whole judge thing never really even entered. It wasn't until later, again, the humility, but how many laws she had written for our state, how much she had done for the court, how much she had done for the people in our community, people that stood before her, as well as her prosecutors and her defense attorneys, just the lives she'd changed. I know that, and I believe that, and amazing, strong leader and human being. I just saw the flip side of the friend that tried to live, even before her diagnosis, every second of her life. And I've used this before in speaking about her, that she was extremely deliberate. She was deliberate in planning. She was deliberate in what she wanted to do, and she never could sit still. Like, if we were here, we were already planning the next trip.
Right.
And very fortunate to travel with her around the world. Very fortunate to travel with her here. Brooke was diagnosed with MS, and in a matter of a month, we had a team formed to ride a bike for an
tell us about the biking event. Y'all did wonderful with that.
Yeah, so we rode it's a 150, but we always did 75. But Donna Figurina Smith, and Grace and I, the very first ride, Brooke wasn't even home, and we just rode and gutted it out. It was the most hard. It was awfully hard.
I remember you reporting to me at Rotary about how awful it was.
It was.
You guys, you weren't prepared for that kind of ride.
But by the second year, we had our own, pit crew. We had our own Lloyd cooking for us at the caboose in Macomb. We had everything. So, and
bear in mind, these are women that met at spin class, so you're already in great shape. You're just not in 75-mile ride shape.
Yes. So we certainly did that for Brooke, but she gave it as well. So it's a loss. It's a tremendous loss. As a friend, as our community leader. as a mama, as a grandmother.
Absolutely.
And it's just, it's kind of still not real, Parker. I'll be honest. So,
well, folks, I would recommend you. It takes a little digging, but it's right here on our Facebook page. Go check out Grace's interview because it gives you such a strong feel for her passion for the court. I mean, it's a very small glimpse of who she was because it didn't. You're not going to see how fun she was and irreverent and what a great partier she could be and the mama and all that.
The worst dancer in the world.
But what you will see is how much she cared about her court and the community. Like you mentioned, she just didn't stop at the end of the day when she banged the gavel and adjourned the court and made the decision. She hustled over to Baton Rouge to make sure laws were put in place to protect kids. She had such a passion for especially the juvenile portion of her court. It was really inspiring. So we're going to have to elect a new city court judge. This show isn't political. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I would recommend you go watch Judge Gassaway and think about the issues she presents in her interview and the things she did. And when we pick our next judge, nobody's going to live up to Grace. Those are too big of shoes to fill.
We certainly want someone to continue.
Yeah, we can get a feel for what could be done there because it's a heck of a lot more than just making rulings in cases. And I think the last case that my team and I tried before COVID, before the court shut down, was in Grace's court. And I'm so glad I got that last one in. It was a very small auto accident. It was not worth a lot of money. None of the cases in that court are if the jurisdiction's low. But it was neat to get to do that with her because I remember the first trial before Judge Gassaway, knees knocking. It was over a lemon car. I represented the dealership, and somebody said the car was no good. And anyway,
she loved you for sure.
She was the best. She was great. And of course, she hired my wife. My wife was working for Judge Gassaway when I met Brandy. So, and speaking of that court, Tony Licciardi has chimed in here to say, "Hi, Sarah Mitchell. You are the best." Thank you, Tony, for watching, and thank you for adding YouTube PK. I know you meant the first comment, but I appreciate the second, whether you meant it or not. Folks, we're here, of course, with Sarah Mitchell. We're on the home stretch. We've got about 10 minutes to go, and we've been talking about her career and about community service and about people in her life. Let's talk about things that you do for fun, because I think you certainly did a lot of fun things with Grace. You mentioned a little bit about traveling with sports, but what else do you like to do when you're not saving the world as a hospital vice president and a community service, nonprofit president, and so on?
I guess I do enjoy exercising. I know that's not
somebody's got to, because I sure don't.
I'm not this big marathon runner, but I do like going to a class just to kind of get your mind off stuff. I really do like yoga, just from a stretching perspective, from a stop and breathe perspective, just because I'm not really good at that. Definitely traveling. I do still love to do that. Any type of sport.
Tell us about your travels. Where have you been that you really enjoyed?
I guess even thinking back to Grace, probably one of my wonderful trips. We had gone to Europe and we went to Ireland and Spain and ended up in Portugal. It was Brooks. Oh, wow. Yeah, it was Brooks' graduation trip. So that was amazing. Been able to travel with my friend Mary Claire that I mentioned.
What part of Portugal did you go to? I'm sorry to cut you, but I have a dear friend, Jeff Janusa, who's there right now with his family in Lisbon. Did y'all make it through there?
But then we went to Madeira Island, which
cool.
That was pretty spectacular. And with my friend Mary Claire, very fortunate. I think being a single person, I'm always the plus one for multiple friends. Right. So I got to go with her when her daughters went to Europe. So that was Paris. And I think we spoke about it before. We went to Paris and Rome and Monaco. And it was just wow. I can't afford to live those places, but I hope to always just be able to travel. And my brother lives in California, so I'm able to visit him, and have a niece in New York, so able to
What part of California does your brother live in?
He's in Sacramento. Then I have aunts and uncles and cousins in LA, so in Orange County. So kind of a good, I guess, mix, if you will. So.
Well, Tony Licciardi is going to reveal how ignorant I am because I can't pronounce this here. But he says, "Tell us about it." It's Collioure. What's that? Where is that?
What are you talking about? I can't. You know what? I can't see.
I'm sorry. Collioure. I'm not going to butcher that beautiful French word with my redneck Ponchatoula high school education.
Tell Tony's gonna have to. Well, Tony, give me another hint to
Tony,
that.
you're gonna have to hit her up, man, to get that info. France, it's to France. Thank you for breaking it down to
Well, I knew
Ponchatoula
it was
level.
France, but I didn't want to Paris. I didn't get to.
Tony, what happens in France with Grace stays in France. Okay. Rookie question. Tony's a world traveler. Tony, we'll tell you about France whenever you tell us about England with Nick.
Exactly.
Okay, Nick Finnegan.
Exactly.
But I do. Paris is wonderful. Brandy and I discovered our boy Luke while we were there.
Oh.
It was magical, but Tony's a great Tony. Talk about a brave traveler. I can't remember how young Gordon was when he and Christy first, crossed the pond, but he was a little tight. They were brave. They did it with a toddler or maybe even a baby. Well, that's really cool. So as we close down here, Sarah, I would like to ask you some questions. Clearly you have so much wisdom to impart to the next generation. You've been so accomplished personally, professionally, academically, you name it. So if you think back to yourself, when you got started fresh out of one of your 5 colleges you attended, or better yet, think of some young upstart now, a young woman who aspires to maybe one day run hospitals or clinics or, lead organizations. What kind of advice would you give to that person?
I think initially oh gosh, let me think. I know we already discussed this. I think truly don't be afraid to change. Obviously with my proctologist, that's kind of where it comes from. I was on this path and I thought I was hell bent on being this path. And then I kind of went with something I really love to do. And then although I maybe came full circle and back into more of a corporate setting that I thought I originally was going to be in, truly following the PT path and then having all of my other passions on the side truly led me back to be where it is. But I don't think had I not had a traumatic change in my life with my dad or something that I actually would have been as free to make that change. And I think too, when he did pass away, it was like, boom, I'm doing something else, And so I think you have to find that passion, but at the same time, if you get into something after years, I went from being a therapist to maybe more of a management. I do think just to not be afraid and just to try. And there's no reason at some point in my life I may not do management and go back to therapy. So there's always, I just think you have to follow what you truly want to do. And then the rest, like I said, the whole thing about me being here for my mother, it all fell into place. So I guess it's the fear factor, and I know it's scary. And I think you can try different things and settle, and figure out what you want besides having that direct path. Unlike you, Mr. Lawyer, after, we knew you were going to be a lawyer.
No, I'm a simple man. I just did what my big brother did. I just followed him as far as I could, and I couldn't make it all the way across the lake to New Orleans. So I stayed in Ponchatoula. What about this? What about the next chapter? Because you have been a woman who's accomplished all these things, but there seem to be kind of clear chapters in your life where it's like this door opens and you move on and up. And, what do you think that, you're going to be focused on? Obviously, your profession, you're locked in on this wonderful job you have, but do you have any ideas about other chapters that are coming up? Do you think you're going to, start a cooking show or what? Circle back to broadcast gymnastics?
I don't know.
What do you think about in the coming years for Sarah Mitchell?
I do think there are a lot of possibilities, certainly with just in relationships and friends. Having my friends are now having grandchildren, so I think that's a whole nother avenue to be a part of and be instrumental in people's lives and getting to share people's lives. And that I recently got a dog, so that's a huge other new undertaking for me.
Oh, tell us about your dog. What kind of dog? What's that been like for you?
He's amazing, and would not be the person that would have a dog sleep with me, but yeah, I'm that person now. So he has a monogram car seat. I'm embarrassed. So he's a little miniature Australian Shepherd. His little name's Louie, and like you said, some things it's full circle. Mom left my life and little Louie came in. So it's just,
that's cool.
just one of those things that you never know what I never thought I was going to be a dog person. So who knows? I may start a cooking show, but I don't really cook now, Parker. So I don't think that's going to be, you know, in the
I
cards.
could see, hey, have a yoga show. That I could see
That
that.
could be better. That could
And I'm going to tell you,
something.
my wife is into yoga, and my little boys are following in her footsteps. They got yoga mats for Christmas, and just yesterday when I got home, they were all doing it there in the you know, on the floor in the living room. And I tell you what, she's fallen in love with doing it at home. You know, she was actually looking at scheduling, you know, the training to be an instructor at North Cypress. They had asked her to do that before the pandemic. But once she got home doing it on video with the kids, she loves it. So, you know, the Sarah Mitchell Yoga Hour may be a thing. Who knows? Wherever you go, the thing I'm certain of is you're going to succeed and you're going to bring joy to others. And I think it was Mark Verbois in a comment at the top of the hour who talked about you just can't spend time with Sarah Mitchell and be unhappy. You know, she lights you up. And that's clearly happening here with me, as it does every time we sit next to each other at Rotary or whatever. So, folks, I hope you've enjoyed the last hour with Sarah. Sarah, I can't thank you enough for sharing your valuable time with us. Before we go, do you have anything on your mind, on your heart, any parting words you'd like to share with folks about anything?
If I know this was a very light hour, and I really appreciate the light hour, but I would be remiss if I didn't really speak about COVID in our community. And I'll try to be brief, but it's very personal. I'm very passionate about it. Right up the road, my teammates, our physicians, our team is struggling with the highest number of individuals since the pandemic began. So I just want us to be, you know, mindful. We have a mask mandate. It's everyone's personal choice to have a vaccine, but I just ask your audience and everyone to please educate yourself. I personally have had the vaccine, so anyone could call me. Rob Peltier is our chief medical officer that I'm sure would love to be on the show to share the information.
You know, he's actually scheduled. He's coming up, I think, the 19th, and who knows, we may hopefully get him here sooner. But yeah, he's booked.
And he can give probably more scientific information. I'm just asking our audience to educate ourselves. We need to protect ourselves. No one needs to die alone. No one, you know, without. And just going back even with the pandemic with my mother, she never had COVID, but to have to window sit for her and then finally be allowed in. It's just, you know, we have to be smarter as a community. And Tangipahoa is the most amazing parish, I think, but we don't need to be recognized as having the highest per capita number of that, you know, COVID.
Yeah, that's not what we want to be leading.
That's not what we want to be known for. And
amen.
So our team at North Oaks, they're struggling. Our nurses, our doctors every day. I want to make sure people, although this is an amazing hour and thank you for honoring me, but I just cannot be laughing all the time. You know, what's going on up the street is devastating. So, well,
that's what makes you who you are. You're fun, and you know when to have fun, but you also know when to get serious and do your job, and you do it so well. And folks, it's getting real out there. You know, yesterday I talked to, you know, the family, one of my favorite clients got transferred to ICU at university with COVID. I mean, at this point, we basically all know somebody or have family members who have it. So, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I do. And we can close with a quote here, you know, circling back to what we spent most of our time. Dawn Keenan Lennox says, "You bring joy to us all, Sarah," and you certainly do.
Oh, thank you.
So, folks, thank you for tuning in here at Ponchatoula Live. We'll be back same time and place next week, Thursday at 5, and we'll see you then. Thanks so much.